Hey, fellow mathers. Before we get into this episode, we want to share with you how you can get access to free content, professional learning that will keep your students engaged and doing the math that matters. Get ready to go to this link, mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge.
That's right. Registration is open for the free Math is Figureoutable Challenge that's starting May 15th and runs to the 17th at 7 p.m. Central. We're going to have 3 nights jam-packed with learning and routines that you can take straight to your classroom.
In these challenges, we have a great time. We do some math, talk about classroom experiences, give away super cool bonuses and prizes. You won't just walk away with routines that are naturally engaging and encourage your students to think mathematically. You'll also have a chance to win over 6K worth in prizes, including a few virtual PD sessions for your school. I'll be joined by my wonderful co-host Kim and special guest Jenna Labe.
You can register at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge for a fantastic learning experience. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Now on to the show.
Hey, fellow mathematicians. Welcome to the podcast where math is figureoutable. I'm Pam.
And I'm Kim.
And you found a place where math is not about memorizing or mimicking, waiting to be told or shown what to do, but it's about making sense of problems, noticing patterns, and reasoning using mathematical relationships. We can mentor our students to be mathematicians as we co-create meaning together. Not only are algorithms not particularly helpful in teaching mathematics, but y'all, rotely repeating steps actually keep students from being the mathematicians they can be.
So in this week's episode, we are going to tackle the topic of anchor charts.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, we've talked about problem strings a lot, what they are and are not, how to facilitate them. We've actually done some together, but we haven't really talked about anchoring the learning.
Yeah, and let's be clear. As a high school teacher, this was not a thing. This could be a thing. This is a wonderful thing that we can do kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So today, we're going to talk about what they are, how do you create them, when maybe you create them, what goes on them, when would you refer to an anchor chart, and how do you get kids to use them?
Absolutely. So anchor chart. So like we're saying the word anchor, like you throw over an anchor over the boat that anchors the boat to the, what does it mean to anchor learning? And a way to anchor learning is to create an anchor chart.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons we thought we would do this podcast is we have done, so we have online workshops, asynchronous online workshops. If you haven't checked those out yet, check them out. They're wonderful. One of them is free, mathisfigureoutable.com/free workshop, the Developing Mathematical Reasoning workshop. In those workshops and live workshops that we do when we travel around, we will often make anchor charts. We will anchor the learning. And as we've talked to some of the participants in workshops, we realized there might be a slight misunderstanding that we thought we'd clear up today in the podcast.
Yep.
Also, often when we will create an anchor chart in a workshop, we will have teachers say, oh, hey, like I was just writing that down in my notes, but it'd be super cool if you guys actually made cute ones, like nice looking ones, like sharp kind of, and sold them. I would buy those. Totally. Yeah. People have like, put them on your store. We totally buy them. Yep. So like Kim, it's a great idea. Like we should make anchor charts and sell or not. Yeah.
No,
so, all right, let's dive into what are anchor charts. So Kim, what are anchor charts? Go.
So an anchor chart is an opportunity to create an anchor of the learning, right? So in a problem string, you're doing the problem string, you get towards the end, and you want to, in some way, kind of cinch the learning, cement it a little bit more.
Bring it together.
Maybe not for every kid at the exact same moment, probably not, likely not, but you want to have a poster or a chart or a paper of some sort, something that is an example of the type of strategy that just happened. So for me,
could be electronic. You said paper.
Yeah.
Could be electronic. Sorry, didn't interrupt.
So for me, in an elementary classroom, it's going to look like a piece of chart paper that has some sort of cementing the learning that just happened. And I don't know if you want to tell me, like me to tell you what would actually go on mine, but I
I
can.
do, but
Okay.
I have an order to my madness
Okay.
today.
Okay. All
So
right.
talk to me about how you create anchor charts.
Super important.
Yeah, because you could just order them off of our
Yep.
store.
You could, or
No,
you could be,
don't.
yeah. Or you could be like some of our participants who said, can I just take your anchor chart, right? And we would never advocate that, because we think that it's super important that what goes on that chart comes from the students, with some facilitation, some guidance, some kind of little bit of a sneaky from the teacher. Because while you have something in mind that's going to go on the anchor chart, some key pieces, what those look like exactly will come from your students, so that they can relate to it as they use it throughout the year.
And in a huge way, in the intro to the podcast, we say we can mentor mathematicians as we
Mm-hmm.
co-create meaning
Mm-hmm.
together.
Absolutely.
And that's what I hear you saying, is that
Yeah.
you are co-creating. You know the content, but you
Yep.
also know your kids.
Yep.
So you know the content means you've got that landscape. You have a sense and a feel for how this, whatever you're anchoring that day, how it fits in, what it's all about, what are the
Yep.
major important parts of it are. But you want to co-create that anchor chart with students so that, well, I'll let you, like, why co-create? What's the use of having students do it with you?
Well, I think that it just makes it really nice for them to go back to the experience that they had if they recognize making those pieces with you, right? I could create a chart and I could say, hey, we just did this thing. And so this is the chart that I made for you to remember it. But if they have the experience and have to kind of verbalize what they would put on their chart, what they want to represent the experience you just had, then it is so much more meaningful. They're so much more connected to what is on that piece of paper or that digital piece.
Well, let me just repeat, like often we have this kind of traditional setup in a class, especially the older the student gets, where the teacher writes something down, maybe they have a PowerPoint slide, but in some way the teacher hands the student something and the student puts it in their notes. And so
Yes.
the teacher writes something, gives it, it's on a poster, it's in their notes, it's on a PowerPoint, and the student puts that then in their notes.
Yep.
What we're suggesting is something completely different,
Yep.
because we want to anchor the learning through this co-created chart. Think about where we talked about do, say, represent. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, we'll put that in the show notes, where we talked a lot about, we have a
Pam,
podcast on that,
I don't think
did
we've
we
done
ever?
that yet. We should do
Are
that.
you serious?
Yep.
Okay, well, let me just briefly talk about the fact that we can do more in our head than we can say. Like
Mm-hmm.
we own stuff up in our brains, and it's hard to sometimes articulate that stuff. And we can articulate things more than we can represent on paper. It's hard to sometimes put our ideas on paper, even when we can talk about them. And so if that hierarchy exists, one way to help get stuff on paper is for the teacher to say, tell me what you're thinking about.
Yep.
If we skip from the students not thinking about it at all, not talking about it at all, and the teacher just handing them a representation, that's not learning. What happens
Right.
better is when we have the experience. So the students are creating the relationships, and now they have. If you could see me, my fingers are like what how do I describe this? My fingers are like circling around my brain, like my
Mm-hmm.
brain is like going. So the relationships are being created. Then the teacher draws out the words. So do, say, represent. The say part, the teacher draws out the words from students. Let's anchor this learning. Let's put this up on this anchor chart. What would, when you walk in the door tomorrow, what would ping for you? What would, oh yeah, that's that thing we did yesterday that I remember those, that it
Mm-hmm.
worked like this. Like we could remember, oh yeah, we were, and as you pull that out, as you say to students, what could we put up here that would help with that? What kind of words have you been using to describe, say, this
Mm-hmm.
strategy that we're working on? As students grapple with verbalizing that, learning occurs.
Yeah.
The very
Mm-hmm.
grappling, the very act of trying to decide how to anchor the learning, how to generalize what was happening, how to put words to the relationships that were going on, how to put a model on that anchor chart. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what should the number line look like, or what would an array? Like, should we use an
Mm-hmm.
array or a ratio table? What would help us? Should we draw the equation of the line, and also have should we have the graph of the line? Like, what would go on the anchor chart, students? What is meaningful to you about what we just did? As
Mm-hmm.
students grapple with that and decide how that looks, learning occurs.
Mm-hmm.
They actually sharpen their ideas in the process of co-creating that anchor chart
Mm-hmm.
with you.
Mm-hmm. So good.
And therefore means so much more to them, like you said.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what kinds of things go on an anchor chart? I just kind of mentioned a couple things, but what?
So I think there's three big pieces that I have in mind that I want to put on an anchor chart with kids.
Oh,
And
I'm super
sometimes,
curious. I've never heard you say that.
oh,
3.
okay,
Okay. All right, cool.
three big things.
Huh.
And so I think it's going to look a little bit different from class to class, and it's going to look a little bit different from year to year and from poster to poster. I'm a poster writer, because some students might want to add a little bit more, but I'm aiming for three things. And one of them is I'm going to name whatever that strategy or that big idea is. We're going to give it some sort of name. And in early years, right, we probably did a little bit more of a loosey-goosey naming kind of thing. Maybe I might have honored a kid's thinking, called it Mike's strategy, whatever,
Yeah.
pick a name.
Mike.
And so I have a brother named Mike. And so I might have called it Mike's strategy and then kind of like maybe put a little mathiness to it later. Now I know that it's really more important for me to give it more of a mathy kind of feel. So that's one thing, is we're going to name it so that later we can refer to it.
Okay, let's pause on that for just a second.
Yeah.
Because the mathy name, like I remember one year we called something a lasso strategy, and they're like, because you throw it out and bring it back. It was like, problem with that is it doesn't allow you to, well, first of all, it's not very mathy, but it doesn't allow you to what's the word I want? Travel. It doesn't allow you to travel with that. So when you go talk to a teacher next door or next year, and you say, oh yeah, I'm using the lasso strategy.
Yeah.
The what? Mike? Yeah. Who's Mike? So if you can say, oh yeah, I'm adding a friendly number, or I'm using equivalent ratios, or I'm looking at this as a proportional relation that's been shifted. If you can talk about so it's really less about a name, and it's more about a short descriptive sort of description, name, title kind of thing, that again helps sort of sharpen, generalize what's going on. Okay, so one thing is we're going to kind of describe in a short, brief, name-like way. Okay.
Yep, we're going to name it. And then I'm always going to have some sort of example. And so when we're talking about it, we're wrapping up a string. I'm having students discuss, and in that discussion, I'm going to say, hey, which problem from our problem string, which problem feels to you like a really nice example? It might be more than one example. If I'm doing a string that has whole numbers and decimals, I might choose one or the other. But I'm asking them what feels like when you look back at this again, it'll be a really nice example for you to remember the strategy that we're using here. Yep.
Yeah, it'll ping for you. You'll look at that example and you're like, oh yeah, that's that one. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And so the third thing is we're going to put a little bit of words to it at the bottom. So in my head, my poster is being created as we're talking. I've got the name at the top. I've got some nice, really large examples. And then at the bottom, we're going to have a little bit of language to it, a little bit of words about what is happening with that strategy. So if it's an add a friendly number over strategy, I've said that at the top. We've got some examples. And then at the bottom, I'm having these students come up with some words that really describe, because for some of the students, it's going to be a little bit, I don't know, is the word tenuous? They're not perfectly cemented, but as they stare at that poster over time, I want them to have some words that they can read and go, oh yeah, like that's starting to make a little bit more sense. And as we do more problem strings and as we have more experiences with them, they read that and go, oh, down at the bottom, it says you can add a little bit too much and then back up some. Whatever language, whatever words the kids come up with. And again, we're co-creating. And so I have a little bit of hand in summarizing.
Yeah, so it's not like really whatever they come up with, because you're kind of nudging. You're nudging kind of hard. You have you know the content, so you're nudging that well. And again, in that creating, as the students are putting those words in, and you're kind of helping that kind of make sense. Those words at the bottom, that's helping sharpen their understanding, because in order to create those words, they're kind of generalizing. They've now used that relationship over a few problems, or they're beginning to. That generalizing is a form of algebraic reasoning, which is also desirable. If you've looked at the developing mathematical reasoning graphic, counting strategies is inside of additive. We build on that to get additive reasoning. We build on that to get multiplicative reasoning. We build on that to get proportional reasoning. We build on that to get functional reasoning. But more longitudinal is algebraic reasoning. That sort of skirts all the way through there. This is an example of building algebraic reasoning. As you have students generalize relationships that are being used, generalize a strategy, generalize a way of using patterns to solve problems, that's an example of algebraic reasoning. And later, we just put variables to it. Mm-hmm. We're getting lots out of anchor charts that we don't get if we just hand kids, here's the thing, put it in your notes.
Yes.
It's coming out of experience where they're actually doing the relationships. And then in the creative process, the learning is occurring. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Nice. How do you refer? When do you refer? No, maybe. Sorry. I'm going to ask you this one first. When are you creating anchor charts?
Okay. So that answer is probably not as hard and fast as maybe somebody would want to hear, because I think it depends on the students. I'm definitely almost never going to create it after the first problem string that we do. So I have a series in my mind of problem strings that are going to tackle a particular strategy. And I'm really like eyeballing my students, and I'm watching what's happening. And I'm saying to myself, oh, we lobbed out this problem string that's about add a friendly number over. And a couple of kids are hanging on to it. And then I'm going to come back, I don't know, maybe 2 days later, and I'm going to do another problem string for add a friendly number over. And I've got a couple of more kids who are tinkering with that strategy. And maybe one more time I'm going to come back around. It's when I see, I don't know, is there a good percentage, like 75% of my students maybe, who are tinkering with this particular strategy, that I go, okay, now I'm ready to put some words to it a little bit harder. I'm ready to exemplify it. So I don't have a firm answer, but it's not after the first one. And that's what we've seen a lot of people do. I'm doing a problem string one time. We're going to anchor it. We're going to move on to a new strategy. And that's...
Well, and they do that maybe because they've been in a workshop. So when I'm doing a workshop, say it's a 1-day workshop, I've got one shot to teach you a strategy. So we do a problem string. It's usually longer than ones that you would do in class, which also gets us a little in trouble because if people are like, your problem strings are long. I'm like, well, I know, because I have one shot to teach you this strategy to help you develop these relationships. So I should be more clear about that when I work with people, that, you probably have to do a little bit of a shorter version with students and then do it more often. So I think you could do an anchor chart after one problem string if most of your students are maybe not even tinkering, but I'd have to see what your definition of tinkering is, because I want them actively using the strategy. They're actively making sense of it. They're actively, I'm not saying that they own it yet, but when the majority of your students are actively using the relationships that you're trying to build, then I think you can make an anchor chart, because the process of making it is going to sharpen that thinking. It's going to bring some more students even more on board, and it's going to help everybody get better at it.
Oh, so see, we could do a whole podcast about that, because I have more to say about that, but that's not the point right here.
Okay, we'll write that down. So we talk about it. So, golly, I don't even, where are we? When do you create them?
I think I create them when I see students actively using it. But it's not where 100% of students are using the strategy. Right. Right. But I think even more important to that piece is when we refer to them. Because the anchor chart, like you said, does not go in a notebook on a piece of paper that then they just turn the page and they're taking notes that somebody's telling them to take. That poster for me is up on the wall, and then it stays up on the wall for a really long time. My classroom walls at the beginning of the year are pretty blank, because I'm leaving space to create together, and it goes immediately up on the wall. And then that's something that I refer to on as often as I possibly can when I see it naturally occurring in my classroom.
So you see a possibility to use that strategy, and you might say, hey, like, I think we have something that we've done that would really work well here. Or you might see somebody using that strategy, and you might go, oh, y'all, check out what so-and-so just did. Like, look, and you're standing in front of that anchor chart, you're pointing to it. You're like, oh, yeah. Hey, if I may, let's say that you're a secondary teacher or just a departmentalized teacher, someone who teaches math more than once a day. Just a little bit of a kind of trick to getting these made. Here's what we're not suggesting. So say you teach 6 class periods. Don't create an anchor chart for each class period and hang up 6 on the wall. Well, Pam, shouldn't it be the ones that the kids suggested? We want it co-created together. Absolutely. So what you do is during first period, you go, hey, y'all, let's anchor this learning. What should we call it? A brief name, brief description. What examples should we put up here that say to your heart and your soul that will ping for you tomorrow? What are some words we could put down here? I'll put, as we're creating this, I'll put it up here on the whiteboard. I'll put it on something not permanent. Don't worry. I'll put it on chart paper later. Then second period. Hey, let's create an anchor chart. Don't worry. I'll put it on chart paper later. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh period. You're like, hey guys, let's create this anchor chart. I'll put it right on chart paper. So that very last class period, just make it on chart paper. By then, you're pretty good about what that anchor chart should look like. You've had some examples, some time to kind of like, I'm not suggesting totally wing it from the first, but you've gotten like, okay, like this makes sense. When the kids come in the next day for first period and it's a different sample problem, but it's a really good one because you've nudged it all the way along. You've made sure that that anchor chart is a really good sample problem. And they're like, hey, that's not the one we chose. You're like, you could just say, yeah, remember I had to transfer to chart paper. And by that point, like 7th periods, we just kind of created this like, combo anchor chart. So that could be a little bit of a trick to a teacher. What's the word? Hack, a teacher hack, so that you don't like waste poster paper. And we don't need multiple of them. We just need one for each major strategy or big idea or model that we're working on.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Kim, what else do you want people to know about anchor charts?
So I think besides me mentioning the anchor chart on a regular basis, when I see it occurring, I want kids to know that they're there for them to use. It's not a thing that we created and it sticks on the wall and it's just cute and decorative and it's, I made it really pretty because mine never really were. It's there as a tool. And so besides me referring to them, I'm also going to celebrate when I see a student glancing at it, looking at it, wondering about it. And I'm going to say things like, hey, remember, we've talked about a variety of strategies that you can use to solve multi-digit addition problems. You're welcome to take a look around and notice some strategies and wonder to yourself if there are ever going to be any of these strategies that you're welcome to use. So I encourage students to use them as a tool because that's exactly what we created them for.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which could act also, maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but if you see a student continually using a less sophisticated strategy, like for example, it's a multiplication problem and they keep using partial products, you might say, hey, is that one of our major, like, is there for these numbers, we've got these 4 up there, like do any of these feel like they would be, and then walk away, right? You're like, lob it out. Like, you are working hard. You are working so hard. Let's see if we can save you some effort, man. Wow. Like, way to persevere. Are any of these fit better for those? Yeah. That could be a way of kind of pointing it out.
Yep.
Hey, I did want to mention, you mentioned something about how this is not where we just, like I had said, where the teacher hands you something, the kids put it in their notes, and it wasn't co-created together based on experience. I do want to say secondary teachers often will say to me, well, then what goes in notes? If I'm not having students like write down the example problems that I'm doing on the board, because we're not doing I do, you do, we do anymore, then what does go in students' notes? Well, this could be an example of what meaningful notes could look like. So I'm actually quoting Peter Liljedahl there, who says we need meaningful notes. Meaningful notes should be created by the student. And so as we co-create these anchor charts, that could be the thing that I'm like, hey, all right, y'all. Let me back up a little bit. As you do a problem string or rich task, we don't have students have their notebooks open and they're copying all the problems down for the problem string. We don't do that. But as we create the anchor chart, that's the kind of thing that we do want students to sort of anchor for themselves as well. So if you are having students keep a notebook where they're putting notes, quote unquote, those meaningful notes, anchor charts would be a great example of a meaningful note that a kid could put in a secondary notebook.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick because maybe I didn't hear you correctly, but you just said we're not going to have students have their notebooks out and record. And I don't want people to get the impression that they never record. What they're not doing is mimicking, copying every single problem and every example that you write. They're going to take, as we do problem strings, they're going to make note of the things that they need to write down.
They're going to keep track of what they need to in order to solve the problems.
Yes.
What I meant, thank you for helping me clarify. What I meant is that's not in their formal this is your notebook.
Yes.
Yeah, we do that more on scrap paper,
Yep.
or you can
Yep.
even have sort of like a journal where you kind of whatever. The reason I say that is we have had teachers in the past where it's a real formal thing. Hey, we're going to do a problem string today. Turn to page 19, and I expect you to have every problem that we just did copied down. That's mimicking. That's put students in a mimic mode, and they're not thinking. They're just trying to get stuff down in a notebook. So that's what I'm trying to discourage. I'm not trying to discourage students having a pencil in their hand. Kim, I just said pencil.
Yes, you did.
Having a pen in their hand and recording whatever it is that they need to be able to solve the problem. So we absolutely believe in Kathy Fosno's mental math does not mean you do it all in your head. Mental math means you do it with your head. So we're kids can be sketching down their thinking, writing numbers down, keeping track as they solve. Thanks for helping me keep track of that. All right, so also anchor charts. We think they're useful, handy things to help students anchor, to solidify the learning, and also to create algebraic reasoning. Thank you for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is Figureoutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com. Let's keep spreading the word that math is figureoutable. Thank you for listening and making math more figureoutable.
To learn even more, make sure you register for our free challenge at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. You are not going to want to miss the evenings of May 15th through 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Central.
Math teaching, go register now. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Join us to make math more and more figureoutable. And if you can't join live, register and we'll send you access to the recordings. We'll see you there.